to go to my panel. So talk to me.
The one thing we are absolutely sure is not going to change is the need to.
What guidance would you give a system that only has lead goosenecks?
It can seem rather ominous to any utility out there. I mean, it's a little scary as they start thinking about it.
I worked with one utility. They tested for 75 PFAS compounds.
To introduce my panel, I'll start off with me. I am Christine Gonzalez, Senior Project Manager and Storage Tank Queen. Deb and Mike don't know I get all formal for these events with Entech Engineering. Joining me from Entech, we've got Tori Morgan. So she's been with Entech for almost 2 years now as a Compliance Coordinator, Senior Project Manager. She has 30 years of experience and she loves fog. And if you're wondering what's fog? What's fog, Tori?
Fats, oils, and grease. They're my baby.
Yeah, we did a fog roundtable a couple months ago. Plus, on our website now have a blog about fog, all sorts of good fog stuff. So Tori loves it. One of the reasons our panels are so great is because of the variety of viewpoints that we get, and we always bring along our industry friends and colleagues. So returning to our panel today is Serena DiMagno. She's a senior environmental consultant with Spot Stevens and McCoy, and she serves as the chairman of the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection Agency's Small Systems Technical Advisory Committee. That's the TAC board. So if you're wondering why she's so smart, she's been doing this for almost 50 years. So I'm so happy to have her sharing her wisdom today. Also returning to our panel is Patti Kay Wisniewski. She's an environmental scientist at the US EPA Region 3. And if you like what you hear today, she routinely appears at other conferences for AWWA and WWOAP. So I know, is it April 6th or something, I think, in Exton? Yep, and I'll share that date and more information at the end of this roundtable. You'll be talking more and Serena will be talking more. So if you like it, we'll give you more details at that conference. New to our panel today is Deb Watkins. She's from Essential Utilities, Inc. And Deb, is that the parent company of Aqua Pennsylvania? Is that the way it works?
Yes, parent of Aqua and Peoples.
Okay, yep. So she's the director of environmental compliance, and she's been with Aqua for 6 years and with various consultants before that. So it's cool because she has both the utility perspective and the engineering perspective. Mike McGill is the president and founder of WaterPIO. Remind me, what does PIO stand for, Mike?
Public Information Officer.
Okay, yes. So he started out in broadcast journalism, then cut his teeth in the water and wastewater industry at WSSC, that's Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission, by leading their public and media relations strategic planning. And he's a communications specialist. And I know in our industry, it can be so hard to not just communicate with the people, but communicate in the right way. So when it comes to all these rules and regulations, it's so important to make sure that your customers understand what's happening. So he seemed to be a great fit for our panel today.
Hope so.
You will be, let's be positive. So with these roundtables, I like to hear from you. I like to hear from our audience. I'm gonna do a poll so we can tap into what your biggest concerns are when it comes to water regulations. So take a moment, it's a multiple choice, and here's 1, 2, 3, like 6, 7 different topics in regards to, or is it 3, 6, 3? I need my reading glasses, clearly. It sucks getting old. So pick the ones that are you're most curious about or find most disconcerting. And this really lets us focus our conversation on what you want to hear about. And then what we'll do, we'll probably pick the top 3, spend a lot of time talking about them. And then the last 10 minutes of the roundtable, we will just spend 10 minutes doing a quick, what would you call it, a lightning round, where we can touch on those and what the latest and greatest is out there. But sometimes, honestly, these topics sort of merge with each other. So give me another 5 seconds out there in our audience so we can get answers from everybody. And I will end the poll and share the results. So looks like this is the third time we've done this roundtable. Each year we do it on water regulatory update, and every time lead and copper rules always number one. And last time PFAS was number 2 as well, but looks like 3 and 4 is a WIA and revisions to the CCR. Okay. 3 and 4. So thank you, audience. That really helps us to know how to direct our discussion today. So stop sharing that, and I'm going to go to my panel. So talk to me, Patti Kay. I didn't warn you that you'd be going first, but what's the latest on lead and copper rule? What should people be aware of?
So as folks probably know, we finalized the lead and copper rule revisions after probably a decade or more of working on them. And yet we promised to make changes. So the one thing we are absolutely sure is not going to change is the need to develop an inventory of your service lines, all service lines, particularly identifying the ones that are lead, but you need to have an inventory of all of them. We're working hard on guidance for all the provisions of the rule, but it's the inventory we really want folks to concentrate on. And then I think we're looking at sometime, we have so many rules sort of in process. We're looking at a proposal for next year. And we would go final with any changes we want to make to the rule before the compliance dates that are set in the last set of revisions that we did. Okay, so that people have a sense of, we don't want to get there and surprise people after the compliance deadline with changes. We're striving to do it before the compliance deadlines, but things should continue as normal, as folks had been monitoring. That hasn't changed yet, but get working on the inventory for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now, Tori.
So I actually have a question for Patti Kay. So does that, what you're referring to, I know the EPA had come out with it wasn't really an interim, but they had indicated they were going to put together some guidance documents in regards to how to get some of these new requirements accomplished, how to streamline them. Is that what you're referring to with the documents that you hope, or anything that might change prior to the deadline, I hope?
Well, there's always something that we do when we put out with a final rule. We always put out guidance that further provides details on and clarity on what are we really talking about. Maybe some tips and best management practices on how to do some of that. And actually, if folks want to share some of their best management practices for getting information about lead service lines, that would be great, because there's everybody needs to do that. So, but then we will work on revising the actual regulations. They're going to be called the lead and copper rule improvements. Yes. Right. But proposal next year. We just needed more time. We finalized the rule, but then we delayed it with the idea that we were going to seek some additional engagement with the public. And we visited communities, we talked to communities, we got lots of input. To really understand everybody's concern, small systems, large systems, from the health community. And then we know we need to make improvements, but we don't want to delay what we put out, especially with the inventory. So we'll get to the improvements, proposing it next year, finalize it hopefully in another year. But definitely the goal is to get it done before the compliance dates from the revisions. Okay. Which is in late 2024.
Okay. I think from the inventory standpoint, which you're right, is probably the most important and highest priority regarding this rule, is it can seem rather ominous to any utility out there. I mean, it's a little scary as they start thinking about it. But what we found with working with some of our clients is just take a step back, look at what you might have done in the past that you aren't even connecting the dots. Did you do a meter replacement program? Do you have old records from, line changes or anything like that? we have had communities who thought, oh my God, this is going to take me years to do this. They have these records, and before you know it, you start putting all this information down. You've whittled it down to an actual, usable amount of services that you can work with. So I think I recommend to any utility out there who hasn't started their inventory yet, take the time now, right now, and start looking at what you did in the past and how you can take that same information and utilize it towards your inventory, because it really does work. We've even had some clients take this initiative and combine it with another program, maybe a meter replacement program, and do the two things at one time, killing two birds with one stone. So they found that silver lining in having to do this inventory and kind of built it up into, accomplishing another task to get things done. So I think it's going to be helpful if DEP, from a state level, because I know they push down to the state level, will develop a set of standards that utilities can follow to determine what is acceptable for doing the inventory. I think that's going to be very, very helpful to utilities out there.
Well, not only to the utilities, but since the inventories have to be submitted to the state, consistency would be helpful to the state as well. I'll share one thing with you real quick. I live in a small town in New Jersey, and they sent us a text, and then they also did door hangers, and they asked us to take a picture of our service line as it enters the house and connects to the meter. So they don't have to come out here. They don't have to look at our basement. We know that's a huge concern with some residents. They don't want people in their basements, not just because it's sloppy, but who knows what may be going on in your basement. You don't want people in your house, especially during COVID. That was a big concern. I've shared that with a number of folks, including some of our states, and they love the idea, and some people are really running with it. Just it's a simple thing to ask your residents, and you might get really good responses from just someone taking a picture.
Mike, you had a comment?
Yeah, and well, that tees up what I was about to say. That is where the public communications part of this has to be in play. We work with a number of small communities. We're doing some pro bono work for Epic in some difficult locations that have to do lead service line replacements. And that is a number one concern. Are you going to let me into your home so I can check for myself? Okay, we'll produce materials that will walk you through the process and show you how it's done. We'll produce some quick videos to show you how it's done so you can check for your own lead service line in your home and address the concern that you brought up. To Tori's point, I would say, going back to how do you start explaining the inventory work, you do start off with the base of what you have been doing, your current work under the rule, to show people you have been on top of this issue for a long time, and you'll continue to be on top of this issue as you have to move forward with compliance. You show the process, you show your testing, you show what you've done to get that public confidence back up. And I'll give you a quick story about combining it with your AMI work. We do a lot of AMI communications. And unfortunately, some people, when this was announced, just immediately said, okay, I'm going to check for lead as I'm swapping out meters. But they didn't develop any public communications to go with it. They just decided to do it out in the field. Customer came out with someone who brought us on board to address the problem that was created. Customer came out and said, what are you doing? Well, as we're swapping out your meter, we're checking for lead. You can imagine what happened when that customer, who hadn't been communicated with at all, said, wait a second, you're checking my house for lead? And that started being an issue. We were brought on board to kind of tamp that down. But that's where, even the greatest of steps, the proactive steps, can be problematic if you're not communicating properly. So what we tell people is, listen, you are going to have to communicate this at the end. Like you said, these inventories are going to be publicly available. So if you're going to communicate at the end, you might as well start at the beginning. Have a plan, roll it out proactively. This is what we're doing and why. This is what you will see. This is where you can help us. And if you lay that foundation at the start, you're going to be in much better shape as we not only handle the inventory part, but every other piece that comes up down the line.
Excellent. Serena, I'm curious, any words of wisdom, any best practices that you've heard about when it comes to the inventory for lead service lines?
Yeah, the message is start.
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 Right.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are kind of sitting back and they're feeling a little overwhelmed. We've all talked about this, but I mean, basically, you've got to start and sooner rather than later, because you know, that's going to be the foundation for much of the compliance with the LCRR.
Okay. Yeah. Question from our audience. This came in from Benjamin. He says, let's say you've got paper records for 90% of your services. Do we need to dig up the services in order to comply with this rule? So who knows the answer to that?
Well, I think it would depend on what not necessarily. I think it would depend on what your paper records say. What kind of information did they reveal? We do recommend that pictures tell 1,000 words. They're extremely helpful. And I'm sure Mike will have some feedback on this too, but no, not necessarily. It's not going to require them to dig up all those lines to have further validation.
Okay,
Right.
Mike.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. There are steps. We know of a company, Blue Conduit, that does what's called machine learning, where they can use the data that you have to target homes so you don't have to do widespread investigations. But going back to Tori's point, there is an aspect of how strong your documentation is at the very start.
Okay. Now, Deb, I said I wouldn't call on you, but Deb, I'm insanely curious. What's Aqua's position been as far as this goes? What have you guys been doing?
Well, it's highly varied depending on the situation. So we have a number of different states that we're in and different types of systems. So I would say prioritize your systems. You want to look at where do you think you have lead service lines? Where do you think you may have a need to look more closely at your corrosion control practices in those systems, and kind of take a kind of a little bit broader approach to maybe 5th liter samples, try to get an idea of where you might need to address certain areas of your systems. And I think the regulation does not necessarily require that you pothole and confirm through visual observation, but there may be areas that you feel you might need to do that, or if you use Blue Conduit, you might want to build your model based on some specifically requested data for various locations. But I think you have to use a whole lot of tools. You put the data that you have, if you have observation data, that would take precedence over any other data you have, but then you layer in years built for the homes and when the lead ban occurred. So you layer in all different types of data and see what you have left. And once you see where your holes are and your gaps and where maybe your vulnerabilities are, you start kind of trying to dig into those areas. But I think you have to kind of lay it out kind of in a progression.
I think strategic soft digs are going to be something that once you make those layers and determine high impact areas or potential high impact areas, that's where you're going to focus on whether or not you need to do some of those strategic soft digs in a certain area to determine if there are actually any lead services. So.
Mm-hmm. Another question from our audience. I believe this is probably best suited for Patti Kay. This is from Sharon over at Chester Water. So she said, when do we expect EPA to get the guidance rolled out to the states? So any sense of that?
I don't have a time frame for you. I'm sorry. And our states are begging for it as well. Not just the implementation guidance, but there's a number of pieces that are being put together here for the lead and copper rule revisions. So soon, and as soon as we can, because we know everybody's anxious to see the guidance, to make sure they aren't spending time and resources doing something that's not appropriate. So yeah, we'll share things as soon as we know.
Okay. And reminder to our audience, we're taking questions from you throughout. Please use the Q&A button to submit any questions or comments you have. So Kim Mazer, he had asked the same question. When is this being developed? Another question from our audience. Let's see, what is EPA going to require in the lead service line inventory, particularly material of service line from main to curb stop, utility owned, and service line material from curb stop into the home, the customer owned, the material of the customer plumbing. Do we know that? Yeah, or do we know what all information has to be provided?
So we do make some statements in the regulations about, and I'm sorry that I can't speak to that off the top of my head, and maybe others could, but there are some statements made in the regulations, and then the guidance, of course, is going to go into so much more. But hey, if you have all that stuff, that's really great. Pull it in from your records. Yeah, I don't know if Mike or Tori can expound on the pieces that we're actually looking for.
Mike, what sort of pieces do you guys track?
Well, I mean, we relay how the work's going to be conducted. So the breakdown that we focus on for the communications is making sure whether someone's got a lead pipe in the public communications, whether they've got galvanized, how do you determine that? And then, you know, that's where the customer can come in and help out the utility when it comes to their inventory work. And so I'll leave it at that right now, but that's the main focus of the public communication. This is what we're looking for. This is what we need you to report to us about.
Tori, I'm not sure, has Entech been involved in helping clients with a database? And do you know what information has been collected?
I do. So we are, to answer your questions, yes and yes. So we're looking at, when you're looking at the particular pieces, you're looking at the public side, which would be the water main, typically to the property line, or depending on what your specific community has. And then you're also looking at that private service line all the way to the house. That is what you're looking at to determine whether or not there's any lead constituents. So you have to have the information on both. It is not considered a full lead line replacement unless the entire section is replaced, the whole thing. So you can't do a partial replacement and count it as a lead line replacement, because it doesn't work that way. So, when you start talking communication, and Mike touched on this, wow. I mean, this is huge. I mean, this is a huge communication piece that needs to be worked on and shared and gone over repeatedly with your clients and your communities, because it can be a little confusing, because someone, the utilities aren't necessarily financially bound to have to replace the private side.
That's right.
However,
in a practical world, it's not considered a full lead line replacement unless the entire thing is done. So if the utility changes their side, but the private side doesn't change their side, you're still in a bad spot. So that's why this communication and these discussions up front on how you're going to handle a lead service line when you find it is so crucial. And then you start getting into discussions with your communities on, are they going to support and help fund these replacements? Are you going to be looking for grant opportunities? And I will I'll put on my little grant hat for 1 second, only for a second. With the infrastructure money out there, with the all of the funding that's out there, lead, the two 4-letter words, PFAS and lead, that's where the money is going. So now is the time, again, coming back to that inventory, get your inventory done so that you can start putting in for grants and opportunities to do these replacements to meet the requirements. So.
And if you want more information, not only from panelists here on rules and regs, Tori will be giving a part of a talk on where's the money, like where can you get funds for various things. All of them will be speaking on Wednesday, April 6th in Exton, Pennsylvania at the Southeast Pennsylvania AWWA/WWOAP conference. So we'd love to see you there. Other comments about lead service lines, Mike?
Well, I just wanted to say that, we are dealing with some of the most sensitive communications we will have with our communities and our customers here. I talk about this all the time. I did Flint hangs over everything we do on the lead issue, every single thing, and we still make mistakes. The situation in Benton Harbor, Michigan is just infuriating because they made many of the same mistakes in the exact same state when it came to communicating about lead. So when a customer hears that they have a lead line in their home, or if you have to say that their pipe is unknown, you've got to really be ahead of the game when it comes to what your game plan is for communications. We say this, that people can have the best operational plans possible on replacing lead service lines, but if they don't communicate it well, it can look like the worst possible plan. So we have to acknowledge the fact that if I've got lead in my pipes or possible lead in my drinking water, I'm going to the computer, I'm punching in lead in drinking water, and I'm going to be bombarded with Flint. And it's just a fact of life. So we have to be prepared for those most sensitive moments. The thing is, we can be. I mean, this is a good thing. We are going to work to get lead out of our systems. And this is how we're going to do it. But there are going to be so many sensitive points. We're only talking about inventory work here. I'm not even getting into the other challenges yet. We've got to be out front communicating on this from the get-go. And those who don't communicate are, to the earlier point, if you're not getting ready for the inventory work, you're going to be behind the 8 ball right at the start.
Okay, excellent. Tori.
I just want to piggyback since Mike brought it up. This is what's so important about this inventory. At the end of the day, if you have all these unknowns and you don't do the homework to figure out what they are, an unknown, when it's all said and done, is considered a lead line. So that is going to really mess you up when it comes to replacement requirements, monitoring requirements. So it's super, this whole inventory piece, we can't emphasize it enough. It has so many impacts if you don't start getting it done now and getting that information. Come 2024, if you have like everything's, 95% of your system is unknown, it's going to be a world of hurt.
And I'll throw in one more point. When the public hears that the water system doesn't know what its pipes are, that is going to be a difficult spot for the utility to be in and explain. So you've got to prepare for that before that happens. So we say this all the time. The public's going to be like, what do you mean it's unknown? What do you mean you don't know what's in your system? And you're behind the 8 ball right at the start.
So I'm curious, I'm going to do it again. I'm sorry, Deb, but curious about Aqua Communications to your customers. Do you know what you guys have been doing?
I think a few of our challenges is you'll face a little bit of disinterest by our customers when you're trying to learn about the materials in their homes. And you'll also face issues with owners versus renters. Right. And it can be a real challenge because the renters would like to have their lead service line replaced. And we're actually in a very good position right now as a investor-owned utility that we can replace customer side lead service lines under Act 120. So we actually get pretty frustrated when we're not getting responses or callbacks, and we can't contact owners who actually live in other countries in some cases or other states. And the renters are aware that lead service lines are being replaced in the neighborhood around them, and it's very difficult to get traction. So, we're a little bit frustrated with that. We feel like it's a great opportunity for these folks that do have lead service lines, but people aren't taking us up on it all the time. And it does put us in a difficult position. So, we face that with main replacement projects that, we really do want to not have a partial, and it's a problem. So, we're trying, as we go, we're trying to develop better methods and trying to figure out how to get better traction with the customers. And, it's a learning process for sure.
Yeah. So the two questions, they're similar from our audience. I want to touch on those. Chris Borger says, we are hearing that EPA will not require lead goosenecks to be replaced. However, the Pennsylvania DEP may require goosenecks to be removed. When do you think this will be confirmed one way or the other? And Madeline Groover says, what guidance would you give a system that only has lead goosenecks? Do we need to replace the entire line? So panel, anyone venture a guess on what the answer will be there?
I think that's a slippery slope, because I see Patty smiling. I don't know if, what the definitive is on that. I think that's where we're all kind of waiting on pins and needles for them. Some of these more specific questions to get answers, so that we can give clear guidance to our communities on how this is going to be accomplished. So I would be a little hesitant to give a solid on that one until DEP or EPA puts a position on it.
Well,
Patti Kay, any insight? Or I'm sorry, Serena?
DEP can't really move forward either until EPA provides that guidance to the states. So we're kind of in a quandary here, waiting.
Okay, so yeah, tune in a year and we'll give you more information.
Right.
Clock is ticking.
And what do utilities often do when they have that situation? They'll wait. They'll sit back and they'll wait, and it kind of paralyzes them from taking action. And as I think we've mentioned here, you've got to get going. And we talk about the revisions, or the improvements, I should say, kind of running sidecar to the rule that's been implemented. There are a lot of people who are like, wait a second, why should we put in all this effort and time for things that might not even happen? The inventory, we do tell them that's going to happen, but everything else they're concerned about. On the comm side, it's pretty easy, because we just say, listen, get your comms ready for anything. Just get going. You work under the current revisions, and you're going to be better off whenever the final ones come down, because I don't see communications pieces of this being weakened at all. Not a chance. So
Okay.
I'll leave it at that and move on and let others.
Patti Kay? Oh, sorry, Serena?
Yeah, I just want to put one point forward. The requirement to have a lead inventory has always been there under the lead and copper rule. So it just hasn't been enforced, and it hasn't been pushed. But utilities need to understand that it was always their obligation to have an inventory.
Good point. Yeah, I remember hearing about this years and years ago, and everyone's like,
Yeah, it just didn't, it didn't get any traction, and people just kind of left it, fall off the radar screen. But, now it is, it's a serious requirement. And
Well, I mean, there's so much to do, just keeping your utility running. Deb, you had a comment?
Yeah, I think one of the problems also is that utilities may have had an inventory for a while, and they set it up based on non-existent rules. And, so now, you may not have the granularity that you might need. How do you use the data now? How do you modify it or make it acceptable? So you might have great data, but if you don't have it parsed out in ways like for us, for a long time, we're calling goosenecks lead service lines on the utility side. And I know particularly in some of our states, that's become a problem. It's like, is it really a connector or a service line that's lead? So that's a problem. The other problem is just, how do you know if it's a galvanized needing replacement or requiring replacement? If you may have gone through a lot of efforts, but not indicated necessarily whether there could have ever been a lead service line upstream. There's just a lot of nuances there with using an order inventory. And so how much does the utility actually have to document what went into any previous inventory that was done? We're kind of almost starting, I can't say over again, but we're building it now, so we know the sources of data. And there have been a lot of locations where we had unknown, not lead, but we didn't know where the sources were, of the information that was provided. So it's like we're almost obsoleting that data, and that's like, a nice little chunk of data. So, that's the difficulty I think a lot of utilities might have, is how do you use the older data that might not have the substance behind it, that you can actually use it with confidence. So,
Good point. Yeah, Tori, you had a comment?
Well, I wanted to mention, kind of linking this back again to funding opportunities. It's some people may say we have the cart before the horse, or however you want to refer to it, but we have to move forward with the inventory, and the question about the goosenecks is such a good question. And I think there's communities out there who've had similar concerns and issues, but in an effort to move forward or to complete their inventory, and to go out for possible funding opportunities, if it's an aging system, they may see the value in saying, okay, you know what? We don't have a definitive answer on this, but it's an aging system. We can get a full grant to replace the entire thing all the way into the home, and they'll just do it. I'll just throw a plug out there. We've worked with Penvest with many of our clients and had such a great experience in getting some amazing grant opportunities for different clients for a ton of millions of dollars of lead replacement within their community. And they're using some of their older information, things that they had for an inventory, to build up as much information as they could, and replacing their aging system to ensure that there's no lead involved. So, I think, again, some of this, we have to take the initiative, and I can't imagine in a million years EPA or DEP would give a utility or a community a hard time if they're taking the initiative to do an inventory. They're not going to come back, I can't imagine, and say, oh, nope, your inventory is not good enough. You're going to have to do the whole thing over again. Assuming you're getting the basic components of it right. Because there are communities out there that are already well into their inventories, and some of them have received funding opportunities already for lead line replacement.
Speaking of funding, Dave Henning shares Penvest will have roughly $200 million per year for the next 5 years under the bipartisan infrastructure law. Most of these funds will be focused on lead service lines, PFAS, PFOA, emerging contaminants, and traditional drinking water and clean water projects. So keep that in mind. Do you want boom, let's move on to the next topic. So second biggest concern of our audience was, speaking of PFAS, PFOA, that was the second one. So panel, PFAS, PFOA, what are you guys seeing out there? What are we dealing with? Rules and regulations. Who wants to kick things off in our panel? I'm seeing lots of hands. Well, Tori.
Well,
later.
I believe that with PFAS, in Pennsylvania, the comments will end on April 27th. Is that the right date? Am I saying the right date? So they're looking at some new potential, maximum contaminant levels for PFAS. And so that should be quite interesting as we move forward. So it's 13 and 14, I believe, for PFOA and PFAS respectively. Am I saying that right, or do I have them reversed? I think somebody tell me if I have them reversed. I think I have them right.
It's 14 for PFOA and I think 18 for 18. PFOS.
Okay. I don't have my notes in front of me. So, that public comment period is coming due. So Pennsylvania is on the road to developing those limits for the drinking water side. But I think what's also important to remember is, alongside of that, not directly related to water, PFAS is being looked at in biosolids, in effluent limits for industries. It's being looked at across the board. So I think all the different aspects of water and wastewater and industrial are going to start to see PFAS. And certainly, if you haven't already heard or gotten a letter, UCMR 5 is coming up.
Right.
So that's fun, isn't it? Is everybody excited for that? Because that's a
29
whole
PFAS.
bam, that's a whole lot of sampling, over a 5 sample period. I think I forget how many months you have to do it over. It should be quite interesting. And for the first time, it's going to include not just the large facilities, but also mid-sized facilities from
Going down to 3,300 people.
and down to small. So this is new for a lot of utilities out there to have to do these UCMR and to have to do the UCMR 5 is going to be quite interesting. And the sampling is a little more unique. So I think you're going to see a lot of conversation, a lot of webinars. If you haven't had the opportunity, there's a lot of experts out in the field. I know Eurofins, I've joined in on a lot of their webinars. They do a fantastic job at talking about PFOA and PFAS and sampling requirements. There's a variety of labs out there that specialize in it. So, take that opportunity and understand what that sampling is all about, especially if you have to do that UCMR 5 testing.
Okay, Serena, talk to us. What are you hearing?
Well, I just want to remind everyone that there are 5 virtual public hearings on the PFAS rule. March the 21st, that's at 1 o'clock. March the 22nd at 6 o'clock. March the 23rd at 1. March the 24th at 9 a.m. and March the 25th at 9 a.m. You can go on the DEP website and look up how to register to attend the virtual public hearings.
And with the point of, would it be so you can talk to people and tell them your concerns, or is it more so you can gather more information on what others are dealing with?
Either one, but familiarize yourself with the rule, because the rule will be final come this summer. TAC did recommend acceptance of the rule, so it would behoove everyone to be familiar with this proposed reg.
Okay. Mike?
And
so this is.
I'm sorry. Hold on a second. Well, yeah, go ahead, Serena.
And understand that there's going to be a lot of pushback from a lot of other entities, a lot of other industries, other environmental groups. There's a strong contingency of environmental groups who are pushing for, wait for it.
I know. Well, one, I've been dealing with the EWG on that for years. So I've been in the middle of Gen X mess and PFAS since 2016, and how it blew up down here in North Carolina. And I've been going toe to toe with the EWG with their 1 part per trillion new standard that they've been pushing everywhere, including in Consumer Reports, which is a magazine I love, or loved, I should say. I actually dealt with Dr. Linda Birnbaum, who threw that number out and based it on an assumption of lead and arsenic data have nothing to do with PFAS. So basically, this issue, what you're dealing with in Pennsylvania, you're setting down new standards. And this is the consequence of the slower federal response, which is understandable because when you're talking about this and all the different levels that are involved, down here in North Carolina and in Georgia and Alabama, where we've dealt with PFAS discoveries, you're talking about the major employers for these entire areas that are doing the polluting. So there's been this big fight at the base level of how much do we come down on these companies and how much the jobs are going to go elsewhere in this whole chaos. What we try and say to everybody on PFAS is, because we're going to get this checkerboard of standards all across the country, and because we're left as water utilities to explain something that we didn't cause, we have to get out front and communicate about it, or we're going to get blamed. Down here in North Carolina, the utility involved actually found PFAS with NC State University. They decided not to communicate it to the public. They made a calculation that the chemical company would be the villain. Unfortunately, that was dead wrong, because when the story came out, it said toxin in utilities drinking water. And Chemours was 100 miles away behind 3 levels of barbed wire. The utility was 2 miles away, and had to explain why they didn't go to the public when they found out that they had PFAS in their drinking water. So what we advise to everybody is, listen, it's the great unknown. We have a lot of unknowns here. Normally in our industry, if there are a lot of unknowns, we don't talk about it. We wait until it's safe to talk about. You can't do that here. You have to get out front and talk about what we do know about PFAS. And in part, that keeps people like EWG at bay, who are pushing out 1 part per trillion as the new drinking water standard, which we know is a non-detect, and that's purposeful, because they can claim that every water utility across the country might have PFAS in their water. And if that's the case, this is where I push back with EWG. They're coming after drinking water because we're the easy target. They want to use us to attack corporations that are putting out the products with PFAS, because, and this is where they can't push back. If you say 1 part per trillion should be the new drinking water level for PFAS, then you have to throw out all your couches, carpets, clothing yesterday. They've all got to go if you think 1 part per trillion should be the new drinking water standard. And they're not willing to do that, because they know if they stood in front of a microphone and said, everything in your house basically has to go, they'll look like fools. So they come after drinking water and try and set down this new unrealistic standard. The way we fight back against that is to communicate about what we know and how we're going to deal with this issue. And unfortunately, the utility down here that has to deal with PFAS, they got to put on $50 million worth of GAC, and the customers are going to pay for it because it's in the courts right now where they're suing Chemours. So you've got to prepare for the costs that your customers are probably going to have to pay up front for you to get it out of the water. And the idea that they're unregulated, and I'll wrap up here, the idea that they're unregulated doesn't fly anymore. If a mother hears that there's a cancer-causing compound in their drinking water, they want to know what you're doing to get it out now. They don't want to hear, well, we're going to wait for these standards to come down the pike, when for 2 chemicals, PFOA and PFOS, chemicals we know have been bad for almost 2 decades, we still don't have drinking water standards for. So we're in this difficult spot. And so we've got to get out front and communicate about this issue, or else we're dead meat. Sorry.
So other comments? Deb, good. I didn't have to call you. Thank you.
I'm trying to keep from being called on. So I think, the erosion of public trust is occurring because states have different standards, or, they're creating different levels that we have to treat to. And, it causes a problem across, the country. And so, we're kind of left with, well, what do we do? If you have systems in different states like we do, the problem is, you can't tell New Jersey it's okay to drink at these levels, but in Pennsylvania, by the way, it's different, so, you kind of almost have to adopt the most strict standards across, all of your states, so that, you can deal with that. But at the same time, when you start talking about one part per trillion, I mean, we really, need to, have some level of science-based levels. And that's, of course, as we all know it, very difficult. You have so many different compounds out there, and, different, health effects language, and, or health effects studies. And, I'll get back to manganese, it's like, well, is this inhalation dangers, or is this something else, so the studies are only so good, and, and how the data is being applied, might have some applicability limits. So.
And I know this is something Aquas had to deal with, and Chris Crockett's, I think, has done a great job with communications, both publicly and also coming to our conferences and letting us know, okay, here's the latest, here's what we know, here's what we don't know, here's what we're dealing with. Do you get involved with Chris with the communications he does?
I hear them, and I kind of relate, obviously, but yeah, it's definitely a very tricky issue.
Yeah, exactly. Other comments on PFAS, Tori?
Well, I mean, I think, you've got, it takes it to another level then. We're testing for PFAS, people who have PFAS. Well, then what do you do when you find out you have it? So now you have to know what treatment options are out there. And it's not like it's a simple thing to treat. There's only a variety of treatment options that I'm fully aware of, whether it be activated carbon or ion exchange, or I think RO does it as well. And will it take you to the levels that whatever state you're in can bring you to? And with supply and demand being as difficult as it is right now due to COVID, to get to be able to meet those limits and standards, can people get the equipment to installed in their facilities to meet those standards? So it's like this vicious circle right now, and everybody's just trying to figure out how to stay ahead of limits, regulations, communication nightmares, things like that. So, there's a lot of moving parts to PFAS, and, we have to continually kind of be on top of them so that we can make sure and share accurate and real-time information with our communities.
Now, Mike, you had mentioned that you were on the WEF's PR team for Biosolids.
Yeah, we were added in to look at their toolkit because we've served on PFAS teams with utilities across the country. I can't stress this enough. It's becoming the #1 threat to biosolids programs all across the country because it just is a PR nightmare. Even though at the levels we're finding all across the country, they're at safe levels for the data we have, you do have situations like in Maine and what we dealt with in Georgia, where you'll have high levels that get a lot of coverage. I worked with one utility, they tested for 75 PFAS compounds because they wanted to make a case to move to Class A biosolids. They came out clean as a whistle for all 75. They still killed the move to Class A biosolids because they were worried about the 76, because there are thousands of these in our water supplies. So we really do have to get out front and communicate about biosolids and talk about the issue, or else we could lose our biosolids programs very easily. The utility down here that mishandled Gen X in their drinking water, because they had RO and leachate at their landfill, they could take their biosolids to landfill. They killed their program. They took them to landfill. The problem was every other neighboring utility around them, activists came to them and said, why aren't you killing your biosolids programs as well? So you have this butterfly effect that can happen if the issue is mishandled. So we'll just preach that you need to communicate about it.
Other comments on PFAS, PFAS, Tori?
Real quick, it's kind of a question for Patti Kay. Is it still the plan that EPA is going to be doing a risk assessment to determine the need for limits in biosolids in the winter of 2024? That's the last I had read about. Do you know if that's still on the books or thought about?
I know we have an implementation plan for covering all media, but I don't know anything about the biosolids program, so I really can't address that, Tori. Yeah.
No problem. No problem.
I guess the one thing I would add, Christina, is that we are aware of Pennsylvania's proposal for standards, and we're actually taking a look at it because we want to know more about what's in there and how they, in working with Drexel, reach these numbers. But there's other provisions within the proposal that we're taking a look at, about public notice and the text and consumer confidence reports and the text that they're proposing, just to see that it's consistent with the other language that exists in the rule for how to do public notice, when to do public notice, and consumer confidence reports. We cannot, of course, approve this rule for primacy purposes, but we certainly want to take a close look at it. EPA's schedule is to propose this year in the fall, and then we would be finalizing that our standards next year. I commend Pennsylvania and our other states who are moving ahead with standards. Virginia's moving ahead in this region, so is Delaware. We're setting standards. I understand why they couldn't wait. So we'll work with those states that set up standards. Once ours come out and if there's a difference, we'll work with them to figure out what their next steps are. There may need to be a revision in Pennsylvania if our standards are lower. They need to be as stringent as ours. So we would work with them. So it's just a matter of stay tuned, and we'll keep everybody posted when we roll things out. We're starting some engagement sessions with others, tribal sessions. They're really to hear the concerns of various communities.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, the panel doesn't know this is coming, but we're going to play a game right now that I'm calling The Price is Right. So, Tori's laughing.
I used to love this game. I don't know now.
So the question I'm going to pose to my panel, but also tap into the knowledge of our audience is, what is the EPA's estimated cost to replace a lead service line? So quickly, let's go through our panel. Patti Kay, what do you know?
I can't even begin to guess. Not an engineer, and can't even begin to guess.
Come on, just go. Would you want $1? $1?
Are you talking about a full lead service line? Or are you talking about per foot?
I can't give any more. I can't. You're thinking too much. Just give me a number. Okay, $1. Tori, what's your number?
Oh crap! I want to go last.
No. You can't pick when you.
See, this is where I get to be a gentleman. I go last. I go last.
And now Kim Mazur's probably on the line going, Tori, don't you get this wrong?
Don't you look at your chat.
Crap. No, nobody's sending me anything. I'm gonna totally guess. People are gonna laugh. $750.
$750. Okay, and you know what? I'm going to open the poll to our audience right now, so we can get them to tune in. So Price is Right, launching this poll. So a couple different choices there. So
what the heck? Mine's not even on there.
Serena, don't look at the answers. Serena.
Oh.
3,500.
3,500?
3,500.
Okay.
There's so many variables here. I mean, this is sort
Stop. You know too much. I know. Average cost. Deb, what's the average cost?
I mean, I would say 8,000.
8,000. Okay. And Mike?
I was around 10 because that's what we've had to deal with to be on the conservative side.
Okay.
For funding, you always want to ask for enough funding. So it was 10 grand was the number. But I think it's.
Well, it's a darn good thing I'm not putting the pricing together for like these jobs, because I'm using plastic used pipe. There might be some cracks in it.
A cool thing, Tori, I know you were working with Kim Mazur in our office, because I didn't even know, how does this work? How does this happen? Are you guys, you're doing a video or something, right?
We are. Kim Mazur actually narrated a video of a lead line replacement. It's really going to be quite amazing. So we should probably see that coming out for public view here. If it's not up yet, it'll be up very soon, I'm sure. So we'll make sure and post that out. Yeah, it should be really interesting.
This is what I suggest to everybody, to use demonstrations. I've used these in water my entire time in water. Bring the press out. Do a demonstration at the start, show them what goes into a replacement project. They get all the video right at the start, that everybody feels well served, and you can refer to that the entire time you're working on the whole process. So I strongly suggest demonstrations, if beyond just shooting the video yourself, bring the press out and give them the ability for them to shoot it themselves.
Excellent idea. So I'm going to end our poll and let's see what our audience guessed. So most people had guessed $4,700. Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah,
the audience, you are correct.
Wow.
EPA says that is the average price, but I mean, you can see as far as our panel goes, there's a load of variables that go into it.
Right.
They'll edit that part out later. Don't worry. Deb?
I just want to add that, you got sidewalks, roads, sometimes plumbers need to bring things up to code. So you have expansion tanks, there's a number of things that could get involved.
Well, Deb, in my scenario, everything went really, really smooth, and
Sure.
I did the work all myself. I didn't have any contractors. I pulled the line through, and I could do that work for you for $750.
Wow. Well, you also probably did like 10,000 of them, right, Tori? So there's an efficiency.
Yes,
And they were all
And
absolutely.
Tori, we'll see you back there next year when you have to
Yeah,
do it
and you
all
say-
over again.
Listen,
Tori, do you have a construction practice that I can engage?
absolutely. You should. I'll send it to you, Deb. It'll be coming later.
Well, thank you guys for playing along. We've got about 15 minutes left, and we still have 4 topics that I want to touch on. So let's just run through those. AWIA, so that stands for the American Water Infrastructure Act. Patti Kay, what's the latest on AWIA, and what should people know?
Well, there's many aspects of AWIA, and I can only speak to the risk assessments and emergency response plans. All the deadlines have passed, but not all the certifications are in. So we're still doing follow-up, reaching out to systems. If there's anybody on the line here who has not finished the work, give me a call. I can tell you that enforcement in EPA is gearing up. I did a training session for them yesterday to explain the requirements. But we also know that, I tell you, we're at 95, maybe 96% compliance here in Region 3. It's really looking good across the country even, but there's a lot of small systems that sell water that also, to another water system who didn't realize that these rules applied to them. So that works. Just, I guess the last thing I should say about that work is, remember, it repeats every 5 years. So we're going to be doing some more reminders and, setting deadlines so people, come back and update their assessments and their emergency response plan. The other aspect of AWIA relates to consumer confidence reports and the requirement for biannual delivery. And I can speak to that, which is basically to tell you, we haven't made any decisions about what that actually means. Neither has the NIDWAC. They listed for us some pros and cons about doing 6-month deliveries, or should it be, a report that covers 6 months and then the next report is a different 6 months, or should it be an annual report that's mentioned twice?
Right.
They haven't made a decision. I'm on a national work group. I would love to talk to folks about consumer confidence reports, maybe in a little while when we sort of narrow down the issues, because there's a slew of them. And then we can talk some specifics about how we might address this, probably through regs and definitely through guidance, lots of guidance and recommendations to the water systems of things that we won't put in guidance, but we really would love to see people improve their translations, the number of ways they translate reports, making them more accessible. Yeah, there's an awful lot still to be decided, but the work group is working on these issues. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Deb?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there has been discussion yet about how to make the reports more understandable by our customers.
There have been recommendations made from the NIDWAC sub-working group to us on accessibility, readability, clarity, how we could simplify language, not necessarily how, but that we need to simplify language. But there haven't been any decisions made. I think we even struggle with, someone could read the report, they might understand the words, they might read the definition of an MCL and they can read it, but they don't understand it. So how do we simplify some of these, more technical aspects of water treatment and how water systems operate? And believe me, the recommendations concern me because all I see is an increase in the length of consumer confidence reports. And I really don't want to see that. But if you read the recommendations, that is likely where we could end up heading. But I love advice from Mike.
Well,
Mike,
let me say this. No, we get this question a lot, and it's something that I know you're chomping at the bit to have settled, because you got to be getting, are we going to have to do it every 6 months? Is it going to be new data every 6 months? I will say this. and it brings us back to everything we're talking about here. For this year, I'm doing work for clients where I'm putting in proactive language about the lead and copper rule, proactive language about PFAS. It makes it a bit longer. I mean, this is where you talk about length, but if you explain the issues up front, you can take that required communication to the customer and help them get perspective in using real language. So you go beyond the required language and provide perspective. I'll give this one example. When Flint hit, I hadn't started WaterPIO yet. I was with my utility. I put in a proactive language about Flint and why what happened in Flint didn't apply to our utility. You know, it was not required. It was something I added in. I never got another question about Flint the entire time I was at that utility, because I got the press report it, I had customer service messaged, it was in our report. That's how that tool can be used to get out ahead and provide perspective on these issues where, you know, it's a bit of the Wild West on information. So I'll just want to throw that in while we're talking about this. But I'm with you, Patty. I mean, we're all waiting to figure out what's going on and what we need to do with the CCRs.
Okay, other comments about OWIA or the revisions to the CCR? Tori?
So Patty, this is just a question. I had read that the CCR final rule is anticipated to be released by March of 2024. Is that something? Is that the timeline they're looking at? This isn't something we're going to see happen next year, or
we'll have a proposal next year, and March of 2024. We actually are under a court order for those dates.
Okay,
we settled. We were sued, and we those are the dates from the settlement. Yes.
All right. With the five basic, you know, I know there were 5 basic: the CCR, understandability, the MCLs, the reporting period, the certification, and the electronic delivery were the 5 components of that focus.
Yeah, to be honest, I think everything's on the table.
All right, great. That's good to hear too. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Serena, anything to add for these elements?
No, not relative to CCR, if that's what you're asking.
Okay. Okay. How about manganese rule? Who wants to give us an update on manganese rule? What we're hearing? Serena.
Yeah. The final rule was adopted. It was adopted by TAC in February. Just quickly, it deletes the public water supply use criterion of 1 milligram per liter. And then it adds a human health criteria of 0.3 milligrams per liter. And it maintains, this is one of the key components here. It maintains the point of compliance at the point of discharge. That onus is not put on the public water system now. It's going to be maintained at the point of discharge. The final rule is expected. The final is supposed to go to EQB sometime in June, and then it will go to IRC, probably the Independent Regulatory Review Commission, probably in September. So that's pretty much where we are at this point.
Okay. Any other comments on manganese? Okay, and how about cybersecurity? I know in the past, Kevin Morley from AWWA, he's been on our panel. In fact, last time he actually got a cybersecurity alert while he was on our panel and was emailing it out to everyone. So if you don't follow him on LinkedIn, I believe it's Kevin M. Morley with AWWA. Every few days is always posting really good information so you know what's going on. And I know this whole Russia-Ukraine thing, we've got to be very, very cautious with cybersecurity. So who has an update? Patti Kay, you want to tell us what you know that's going on?
So EPA, this is another hot issue EPA is trying to address. They work very closely with DHS CISA to understand what's happening. We've pushed out some alerts. Everybody needs to be paying closer attention to this, especially right now, because of the political climate, the war in Ukraine. Yeah, there's a great deal of information. There's probably so much information out there, it can be overwhelming. what I've been recommending to folks is take it one step at a time. There are simple things you can do to protect yourself. Don't share passwords. Think about your physical security as well. You don't want everybody and anybody to have access to your servers. Think about who really does need to have remote access, and limit it to those who really must have remote access. Improve your security when it comes to remote access. Think about multiple authentication, which is what a lot of banks use. You know, you have to get a code via your cell phone or email in order to have access. We do that at EPA. We have cards in our computers with a PIN. I can't get into my computer. Nobody else could either without it. So there's a lot of simple things, low cost, and then you just ramp up from there. You really need to be paying attention to this. All size water systems need to be paying attention to this. EPA's done some training, some fact sheets. We have incident action checklists on how to prepare, recover. Know who to report this to if you have an event, either an actual attack or you think someone has done something. So there are fact sheets, and I guess the last pitch I'll make is if anybody wants more information that EPA is pushing out, contact me. I'll put you on my email group. But we have a webpage on cybersecurity for water utilities with lots of information, links to CISA and all of their alerts, because they're more IT, OT technical folks, you know, more so than we are.
Yeah. And actually, speaking of email addresses, I see we're up against the clock. We'll still have a few minutes of any comments from our audience, or from our panelists. But I wanted to just remind our audience, if you like this roundtable, invite your friends to future ones. I'll be scheduling them starting in April. We're looking at stuff on the wastewater side as well, but also one on funding and water women in the water and wastewater industry. Who's your, I can't see what I wrote there.
Hero.
Thank you. So you can check out our website, entecheng.com, and then across the top of the menu, go to resources, drop down to roundtables. That not only has links to sign up for and learn more about upcoming roundtables, but also links to videos of all of our past roundtables. Future Entech presentations, I mentioned Pennsylvania Rural Water Conference. That's in State College from March 22nd to the 24th. So it's 3 full days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. A little different than how they've done it in the past. Mike mentioned he's presenting, I'm presenting, Entech's giving 7 different classes on water and wastewater. And then April 6th, this is always a lot of fun. The Southeast Pennsylvania AWWA WWOAP Spring Meeting in Exton. In the past, we've gotten up to 180 people there. It's a wonderful environment. I love our industry because everyone wants to help each other. So Tori and Natalie O'Connor from our firm, as well as someone from Penvest, is going to speak on finding funding, what source is right for your project. And I'll be doing a live roundtable on supply chain issues. So it's going to be a little weird going back to the olden days of being there live and in person. So if you want information on these events, let me know. I can send you web links. So to wrap it up, any of these panelists love talking about these topics. Reach out to them via email. And big thank you to Tori Morgan with Entech, Serena with Spot Stevens and McCoy, Patti Kay with the EPA, Deb Watkins with Essential, and Mike McGill with WaterPIO. If you're interested in a PDH certificate or operator CEH, please reach out to me. My email address is there. I'd love to hear from you and help you out. So we'll keep going for a few more minutes. I'll leave these contact information up, but panelists, any other comments in regards to cybersecurity and what you're seeing out there, ways we can protect utilities? Anyone with other ideas? Tori?
Well, it's not necessarily just for cybersecurity, but any of that information that we get our hands on at Entech, information that comes from Patti or anything out there on the web on regulations, cybersecurity, funding opportunities, please don't hesitate to reach out to Entech's Cork, our digital Cork board. We are posting that information and updating it all the time. And we just want to get the information out there for people so you don't have to do the legwork to find it. So please make sure and check that out because there's some really good topics on there.
Good point. Yeah, and the same place that you, same drop-down menu that you'd find our roundtables. It's also a link there to the cork. Serena, did you have a comment about cybersecurity?
Not about cybersecurity, Christine, but I wanted to let people know that it was referred to as the Small Water Systems Technical Assistance Center through DEP. That was the advisory council for DEP. That has changed. We are now the Public Water System Technical Assistance Center. So we cover all water systems now.
Okay.
That's been a huge change, and I want to make people aware of that. You can follow what's going on with TAC at DEP's website under public participation. Just go.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, and Patti Kay had mentioned send her a note. Tori and I know both get it. Probably everyone here on this panel gets Patti Kay's updates. Usually it's like one a week or so, and it's phenomenal just to know what's going on, what seminars are out there. And so yeah, she's not pestering you or trying to sell you anything. She's helping you. So fabulous resource right there. Question from our audience. This is from Jamie Laura, and asks cybersecurity insurance. What is your suggestion for insurance coverage for a system? Standard is 1 million. Do you suggest a little more, maybe 2 million? So panelists, anyone with any insight or ideas on that?
Talk to a good agent.
Yeah.
I can't address it.
I'm not sure either.
And it would vary depending on whether you're a big system or a little system, right?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
And what you're trying to protect and what you already have in place.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, good points. Yes, Serena.
A new threat, or maybe it's not, maybe it's a newly recognized threat, is drones. Drone attacks on utilities have been happening. They've actually happened at public water systems. So you may want to Google that and learn a little bit more about that particular cybersecurity or security hazard.
Okay, good point. Okay, excellent. Looks like we've hit all the questions from our audience. So a huge thank you to our all the viewers out there. A reminder, when you sign off, there is a quick poll. It'll take you 30 seconds. We just want to know, did you get what you were hoping for? Is there anything we can do better for future roundtables? Hey, do you want to be a panelist? It's a lot of fun. And I won't keep asking you questions, I promise. So please take that survey. It really helps us to fine tune these for you in the future. And I'll just do a quick wrap around with our panel. Any final comments, words of wisdom, anything we missed? Patti Kay?
No, this was a lot of fun. Very informative. Thank you.
Tori, any final words?
I will just continue gathering information and sharing it as much as we can. And it's an honor to spend this time with this amazing panel today. So great time.
Yeah, excellent. Serena, anything we missed?
Oh,
Wait,
good question.
I know. Do we have another hour?
Still on Legionella. I mean, if you're interested, come to the April 6th meeting. It's coming fast and furious. There's a bit of a lull now because the legislature's in recess for budget hearings, but it's going to come fast and furious.
Excellent. Thank you, Serena. Deb, any final words of wisdom for the audience?
I'll just raise a question for another conversation, but what happens when we find PFAS on the lands that we have spread biosolids on for years and years, and there's a kind of a legacy there? I'm just wondering where that heads.
There's a whole 5 hours.
I've got a whole presentation on that.
I didn't want to raise it during the call.
Good question. I look forward to learning the answer soon. Mike, any final words of wisdom or anything you can offer our audience?
Just that as you put together your operational response and compliance plans, make sure you have communications to go with them, both internal communications, interagency communications, and external communications. I can't stress enough, you can have the best ops plan possible for all your compliance, but if you're not communicating it, you're still in deep trouble. So just make sure that you've got, it's not a 50-page plan in a binder sitting on a shelf collecting dust. It's a few pages integrated in with how you're going to carry out your operational responses.
Okay, excellent. Well, huge thank you to our audience. Big thank you to my panel. I love hearing your stories, your words of wisdom. And I always say magical things happen when you bring together passionate people. You guys are clearly passionate about water regulations, which is a little weird, but hey, I got a crown and I love tanks, so I get it. We will see you soon. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah.